tradition of artists
and even in just that one location. But we're going to talk a little bit about arena players for the month of January. I know I said the Artist Exchange may not be here, but things may change because we'll be doing some special interview only for the cast and crew and production staff of Arena, the Pearly production. So we'll be doing a couple interviews with the entire cast. So definitely stay forward for that. If you go to the Artist Exchange radio show page, you can see some audio of our rehearsals. We've been talking about kind of the backstory and the message and how Ozzie Davis put this together.
Wow.
So you can go right now and go to the Artist Exchange radio shows page and get that audio. And it's I think we talked for maybe like 2.5 hours, and everybody got to give a little bit of their story and who their characters were. So you'll get a kind of a glimpse if you've never seen Pearly before. Wow. And this is definitely going to be a different Pearly from rehearsals. We're kind of halfway through the point now. So look out for that.
Nice.
But I'm going to jump right into it. And we have Peter Brooks. I first met you at Coppin.
Yes.
You played a white man in the story of Emmett Till. Really, really phenomenal play, and if you don't know who Emmett Till is, please look him up. You can actually go to the new Smithsonian African American Museum of History and Culture, and they have a spooky exhibition on, I say spooky because it feels like you're in March Funeral Home. It literally, you're doing a bypass of the first casket. They have did it, and it looks like it probably did then, and it really is an open casket, and there's an image of him in there, and it is really spooky, but it's worthwhile seeing. But that's the first time I actually met you, and it wasn't until maybe after that show that we even knew who you were, or because that was my first time meeting you at Coppin, and it was just awesome seeing somebody who just wasn't afraid to kind of step in there and be who he was and be unapologetically himself. But as an artist, I always look for those images that I can relate to. And the theater experience that I got before college, from a very young child up into college, there was no representation of me. Yep. I was the only me in those productions.
And that's hard. It's indescribably hard. And you can't even know it until you've been there.
Right.
So, yeah.
But I wanted you to, introduce yourself. Let us know a little bit about who you are up until this point.
So you didn't know about my grandfather when we worked together at Coppin?
No, because I think you had came on after we had started rehearsals. So it wasn't like a big introduction. And they weren't really good at telling us who was around us.
Right.
And it was really us being really young. I was really young then, so I didn't really think, I just knew you were who you were.
Right, this guy who came in and could act and could do this thing, memorize the lines.
We didn't really, the normal cast experience, I don't think we really did that.
Right.
And so...
Well, I had anxiety about who my grandfather and grand aunt were.
Well, let's tell them who your grandfather was first.
Sure. So my grandfather was Cab Calloway. He was a very famous musician who came from Baltimore. In the 1920s, he enjoyed about a 67, 70-year career as a musician. And he really is the grandfather of hip-hop. I think the whole hip-hop movement really started in that Penn
You
North
go make
area.
It controversial. I was watching a clip of that.
I'll defend it, and I'll bring on discussion about this because I think it's important that we know our history.
Right.
And his grandfather's involvement in the Brotherhood of Liberty just after the Civil War. I think if the Black Panthers had known about that organization, that existed and is uniquely Baltimore, they would have benefited from it. And in the same way, I think future artists would benefit from knowing Cab's role in creating the opportunities that we now enjoy. But I never wore it on my sleeve. It was never anything where it was like the first thing I told you, or it was about me or something like that. I was trying to get favor from you. And that's because I always wanted to stand on my own 2 feet and not necessarily on his shadow and stuff. And, you know, I guess now in a way I kind of regret that, because I think the reason why his house is in the condition that it is and he doesn't have the notoriety that he has is partly my fault, because I don't think I've been as good a custodian of his legacy as I could have been.
Well, you have a family too.
That's
but it's
true.
no fault. But we often do that, whether that relative was a good representation or bad representation. We sometimes want to make it on our own.
Yeah,
I remember,
that's right.
you know, having uncles that were well known, and my mom was well known, and I never wanted to. I wanted to make it on my own 2 feet and not be the uncle of. I wanted my name to shine, so that's understandable. But I wish. Just that area alone, we always literally put Billie Holiday on a pedestal, and I don't understand why we didn't do that to Cab Calloway
or Chick.
But we grew up
or
knowing, we grew up knowing Yubi and Billie, and even Cab Calloway's mark and legacy. But like, I grew up in that area. I went to 125.
I had no idea.
So it was a part of what we learned. Like those. We learned Martin and Rosa and Harriet, but those were the other 3 because they were more like hometown heroes. But growing up, I didn't know that they were international sensations. And that's the unfortunate part, because I don't know how many times I probably, you know, in me going to Booker T for programs, probably walked past that house or didn't know who house that was. And I remember just probably this time last year, the gentleman who interviewed you first when you did something he posted it on YouTube, and I remember watching it and not even, I'm not gonna say I didn't recognize you, but I was so, I listened for when white people talk about our communities, and I was so angry that, because he has a reputation of showing different parts of Baltimore, and when it's something urban driven, his remarks aren't as good. And I remember just watching him and listening for that. And I remember not too long after that, seeing you again around at the Pill Center, be like, wait a minute, let me go. And that was, and never, all this time, I never knew that was your grandfather.
Wow.
So it says a lot about just our community and how much we big up, you know, our hometown heroes and just the people that we have here. So it was really important for me not to just bring you on to talk about it, because right now you're in the midst of legal legacy struggle. But tell me, before we get more into, because we got a whole hour to go, but before we get into who your grandfather was, I really want to know who you are, because you are who I know. But we're going to take a quick commercial break, pay a couple bills. We'll be right back here, the Artist Exchange Radio Show, only on BigExposedRadio.com. But that's...
You're like an internal bleeder. Can't see your pain, but it can silently kill ya. So deeply wounded, but don't say a thing. Too afraid of what the people may say or think. So you just sit there and you suffer in silence. Your pride won't let you just uncover your secret. Don't wanna look weak in your image, it ain't worth losing. So you just act as if it's nothing happening. God sees you, and God hears you. Yes, God loves you. You're like an internal bleeder. Can't see your pain, but it can silently kill ya. Suicidal, depressed, but you won't say a thing. Too afraid of what the people may say or think. You feel alone even though the people surround you. Popping pills every night even though you know they can't solve it. The emotional pain, it just seems way too heavy. Your mind is racing, wanna scream, somebody help me. Ooh, God sees you, and God hears you. Yes, God loves you. These type of people sit right under our noses. We don't find out till we're on IG scrolling. We post a few memes, but then it keeps on happening. Something's gotta change, we gotta start.
You are listening to BeExposedRadio.com.
Welcome back to the Artist Exchange Radio Show, only here on BeExposedRadio.com. We are finishing up the year with some really great interviews. We had on last week, we did DDM, and that's the hip hop, alternative hip hop in the city. And now we're talking to Peter Brooks,
Yes.
the grandson of Cab Calloway. And you are an accomplished artist yourself. You started out doing acting and
Yep.
being a part of
Yep.
this art scene, and I know you've worked with the UB Center, UB
Yep.
Lake Center
and
a lot.
the Friends of the Arena Players.
And Friends of the
Yeah.
Arena Players. But who is Peter Brooks? Because you kind of stay hidden a little bit behind what you do. But
You know, I'm just a guy. I mean, of all my heritage, really, I identified strongest with the Native American side of it. So I do a lot of Native American ceremonies and dances and that kind of thing. I don't think it's a thing where you're either this or that, because it's all just a part of me. And
is this probably the side you gravitated to?
yeah, it just
most?
felt like me, you know what I mean? And it just, that's sort of a natural thing. So, and it wasn't even that I wanted to, because obviously the African American culture and the white culture is much more accessible, but it just didn't feel right. So, so yeah, I try to support my family as best I can. Really, what I am, I would say, you know, I'm a helper, I'm a runner, I'm a change agent. I just want to leave the earth a better place as a result of my being here. So I don't put a lot into my accomplishments and what have you. I like to do video, I like to do film, photography, stuff like that. But it's always in trying to be something for, you know, the future down the line, for other generations to really appreciate and see in its context, because it's hard at the time. And I mean, to go back to Cab, you know, he was extraordinarily popular and really innovative. That was his real thing. But growing up, I always thought Duke Ellington was a bigger deal, you know what I mean? I always thought it was Louis Armstrong was more popular. He was everywhere. And of course, Cab, you know, was very matter of fact about it all. This is what I do, you know, pack my bags, get on the plane, fly here, come back. There's my house, you know what I mean? What do we
How
eat
much
for
of
dinner?
him did you get to be around? Or
A lot. I mean, I stayed up there for a while after college, and then you know, we went up all the time during holidays and stuff, and if he was ever in town, we would descend on him in his hotel and stuff like that. But you know, the interesting thing about him, as knowing him personally, is that he put so much into his performance, into his music, that when he was with the family, he just wanted to chill.
so would it be fair to say that you didn't really see the magnitude of who he was? Did you know, like, my granddad is Cab Calloway? As a child.
At times I did, at times I didn't. I mean, I think it's an extraordinary thing to come home, or to get a call actually at school. You got to go to the principal's office. Well, what's up? Well, your grandfather's in town. He's performing at the Kennedy Center. You need to go home, and you know, your mom's going to pick you up or whatever. But you know, as a kid, you don't know, and you go to the Kennedy Center, you see all these people and standing ovations and awards.
That's just what he does. That's what you just thought he did.
Yeah, because he always, and this is the other thing I think that people as artists have to realize, you know, when you look at him, it looks like he's having fun. I swear I thought he was enjoying himself. But when I went to his funeral when he died, I realized, nah, he was working. He was seriously working. It looks easy, and it looks like easy money, but it's not.
Well, the life of a musician is always on the go.
Yeah.
Unless you snag one of those resident job, which is, now is more lucrative, but then you were limited if you were in one spot. Did you ever get a chance to sit down and maybe have those conversations with them? What you said, you learned a lot afterwards.
Yeah. No, we were. He's a granddad, so we were kind of scared of him, and I didn't know that much either at the time. And I guess, let's see, when he died was 94, so I was about 22, 23 years old. And then, of course, you're in high school and college and all that stuff. And, I was just dealing with the fact that I was so fair-skinned in a black community and being called Casper and white boy and, was I white and all of this. So I didn't have that much room to process who he was like I do now with the benefit of time and the ability to do research. And of course, we didn't have the internet back then. So, we were just.
So, did anybody explain that to you or you just?
No. And that's where it's kind of not my fault because, as you said, because we were never sort of prepared like that. I don't want to use the term royalty, but sort of agency as black royalty, we should have been perhaps, prepared that, hey, listen, son, this is what it's going to be like. I want you to do this, that, and the other. You need to think about writing a book at some point or, that kind of thing. And I think Cab also struggled with his place in history. There's the famous interview I put on YouTube where he says, if anybody invented rock and roll, I did. And he talks about improvised lyrics as his innovation in rock and roll. But really, it was the very concept of rock itself because he recorded on February 2nd, 1942, he released a single called I Want to Rock. And that was 12 years before, Buddy Holly's Rock Around the Clock and then the eventual pickup of rock and roll. And that concept is buttressed by the fact that in 1937, he introduced the word boogie into the American lexicon. In 1940, he co-wrote a hit with Glenn Miller called Boog It. 1941, the Andrews Sisters, Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy of Company B.
And we see how many, that is a staple to what the 50s are.
And it came back up in the 80s with Michael Jackson and Casey and the Sunshine Band. And it seems like any song with the word boogie in the title is automatically a hit. And yet, nobody can really tell you exactly what boogie is, you know what I mean? What does it mean to boogie, and how do you not boogie, and you know what I mean?
It sounds like it happens to a lot of, especially our musical artists. I remember a couple years ago, I stage managed a show that a local playwright, and his name just jumped out my head. He wrote a story on Thelonious Monk, and you hear these stories, especially with our black musicians, that were so innovative, but because of their skin color or their culture, a lot of their innovation was stolen or taken and used and watered down and traded off for their success.
That's exactly true.
What was assumed to be their success.
That's exactly true. And I mean, people come up and talk about, y'all got that Callaway money. No, we don't. Yeah. and you go back and look at most of those people, Armstrong, Fitzgerald, Ellington. I mean, by the time they died, it was.
And their music lives on. The Bugle Boy, like that song. I first was introduced to it. I went to a concert, happenstance, just by mistake, Bette Midler, and she was performing that song. So you see, so many people have redone it, or Christina Aguilera, all of them have redone a song like that, and he has some really iconic points in music history, and it's not like he's not reaping, or his family isn't reaping the benefit.
And here's the thing about it: he was at such a crucial point. Because on the one hand, from Cab goes popular music, which is influenced by people like Little Richard, who was kind of an imitation of his, Michael Jackson, even Marvin Gaye, because you've got singers who are talking about my experience, and you're going to
Sam
like it.
Cooke, all of them.
And that was a real innovation in musical history, because before then, if you go back to opera and stuff, music was about relationships and dramatic stuff like that. So he's at that point where he's a key figure in the evolution of popular music, and he's at a key point in cool jazz, bebop, and other forms of jazz, because he was very much a person who believed in promoting his band and the instrumentation of them and the talent that they had. He would write whole songs when musicians would agree to play with him, like Jonah Joins the Cab, and that was just a song to feature you, my one trumpet player out of 3 or half a dozen trumpet
What about
players.
all the movies that he did scores for? Like,
This is true.
None of that comes back to like a foundation or the family at all?
He, and I tell you another thing that's really innovative about him is the fact that he was really the first African American to have his own nationally syndicated radio show. In 1941, NBC ran a show called Quizzical, and that's extraordinary. And he did that show for a year. NBC floated that show, and he never got a sponsor the whole time.
Somebody was sponsoring it,
NBC.
but it never got back to him.
Yeah. But
So that means he never got paid for it.
I don't know. I can't speak to his
In terms of
finances at
a
all.
residual standpoint.
Yeah.
And it's probably living in somebody's archive right now, generating.
Just a few copies left. I know there's one at Morgan or Howard University. But yeah, it's just a few copies of that actual show left. But yeah, I don't know whether at the time we weren't thinking about it, or it was just the thing we did, or that we didn't have generations to build off of in terms of our, this is what you do as a musician and stuff like that. But you even see the same thing today with athletes, that are struggling, trying to figure out finances and relationships and all, without that role of mentorship.
Right.
And, here again, talk about mentors. It was his sister Blanche, who is another one that doesn't get her due. I mean, Blanche's story is shocking, but she was the one who introduced him to Louis Armstrong in 1927. And that's
Wait,
where...
was she a singer?
Yes, she was a singer. She was band leader. She was Jada Pinkett before there was Jada. Jada Pinkett, 1926.
We grew up in this city, and we've constantly heard stories. Like, even for me, my stepdad, at his funeral, I learned that he was in a Temptations style group.
Wow.
And I was like, this man was always angry and ornery, and he was just a regular person. But you don't learn these things about the people who are across the street from you, and in our cases, in our homes, and or our families, and you just don't learn. And it just feels like Baltimore has always been slated.
Man, I tell you, did you know W.E.B. Du Bois had a home in Baltimore? And do you know where it is?
I don't.
See? And even Paul Robeson has
I just
a home
learned
in Baltimore.
I just learned that even Thurgood Marshall, his office was right around the corner, over top of where the FedEx is now. Like, and these buildings are just things that people walk by.
And that's what I hope this crisis brings about, is the fact that we need to take more time to learn our history, to celebrate our history, and to talk about our history and
Document
make it
it.
important.
Document it. And that was one of the reasons that I was working alongside the Pill Center and helping to document a lot of our stories, because that's one of the things that I think in Baltimore we are so poverty stricken, and not on a financial state, but just a legacy. We don't know. Like, beyond my great grandmother, my mother met her mother slightly. She lived to be 112, but beyond that, we don't know anything. And we're so stricken when it comes to our history.
And it's not just us even getting the initiative or the impetus to tell the story, but then we have to support each other. Because, for instance, when I was telling the people who wanted to demolish the house all of the history there, they said, yeah, that stuff didn't happen here. When they were reciting the history from Dr. Halpin's book, the councilmen were laughing.
Right. That couldn't have possibly happened in this little space right here.
But it did. And what is the issue with you not believing it or not being proud of it?
And I hate to say it,
or celebrating
because we're black. And me getting an insight on white history through working at the Pill Center, I learned that our story was never valuable to anybody, and it became unvaluable to us.
Yeah, because we were just property.
We were
like
just
a cow or
property.
something. Yeah,
and
just
it
something
is
to be
so
used.
in these buildings, and they keep the legacy. If I see anything about a crow or a Poe again, I'm a scream, because that history is so rooted in who we were, but it's not anything that is, it's not equal to what we have. Like, we have all of these different places in the city, and some people keep them up, but it's not really important. Or even like what's his name? I can't think of his name. Frederick Douglass had his white wife not preserved his history, we wouldn't have even had his mansion in DC.
Benjamin Banneker. There isn't a student who graduates from a school in Maryland that should not, or certainly Baltimore, that should not go to Benjamin Banneker's house. Here is the Black Bill Gates, if you will. I mean, an absolute, undeniable genius, a mathematician. What do we need now more than anything else in this culture? Mathematicians, you know, and I don't know why. It's like a deliberate effort to keep us detached from that.
But
and then we contribute
and you know
to
what?
it.
I have that argument over here, but it's us, because I remember, like, my ability to, or my desire to do this, sit and interview people, I did my first project on my great grandmother, who I grew up with in my home.
Wow.
She lived with my mother until she died, literally in the house. And I always had the urge to ask her questions. And I did one assignment when I was probably like in the 4th or 5th grade, and she told me about Prohibition, and she got arrested at one point for running numbers. So pre-lottery, she was arrested for doing what now they make billions of dollars a year on, and all her children, my great aunts and uncles, were dispersed amongst neighbors and other family members. And I remember her telling me that story, and it was like a gut feeling, like, ask her more. But it was something about her life and her family's life, because they were sharecroppers, and she would tell me bits and pieces, and then her tears would come, and the memories.
You know, you were responsible for the
right,
tears.
and I was so young, like really young, like elementary school young, even doing that project, because that's all I was able to get out of her was the number running thing. And that was funny to her, because now she watches the lottery on the TV, and people pay hand over fist to these white organizations to be able to do that. And she remembers sitting in a jail cell because of that.
Wow.
And I just remember just our history not being significant enough unless it's going to make somebody money.
And here's the key, and this is the ripple effect of it. So when you have a place that has a strong history, even by virtue of the people who are there in the present, like Martha's Vineyard or Georgetown or something, and they're really promoting that history by preservation, you change the culture, because suddenly people think, wow, this place is valuable because these people are taking care of it.
Just a couple blocks over, there's a black neighborhood in Martha's Vineyard.
Yeah. And
that's just as valuable.
Or, well, look at Bolton Hill, you know what I mean? As opposed to Upton, you know, or Sandtown.
Or just on the other side of North Avenue.
Yeah, we're not taking care of what we have, and we're not really in a position where we can get that kind of mentorship to show us how to build a civilization, or how to build a culture that is peaceful, respectful, cooperative, and all that. And here's the other thing about it, you know, when you go back and look at the story of Blanche and Chick and Eubie and all of these incredible black people, and I really got to tell you, man, on the air, I think Baltimore had as big an impact on the Harlem Renaissance as any other American city, save for Harlem itself.
Just along Pennsylvania Avenue.
Yeah.
And they try to rebuild it, but I don't think it's for the right reason.
Right. When we put value into the stories, then we change the culture. And so as a result, we're able to appreciate more the things that we have. Right now, we don't have value to it, so we don't care about it.
So this meeting that they just had, was it the beginning of this week?
Yeah, the chat meeting.
How did that go?
I think it went well. I mean, they said that they would write a letter to the housing commissioner asking him for 90 days not to demolish the house. And here's how interesting how it went down. And this is just a furtherance of what you were saying. So my argument was that the Great Law of Peace, which was the Native American law, predates Baltimore, all right? And it was in effect for thousands of years, even though it was only codified about 1,000 years ago. That law states that when you are a leader, you are not to think of yourself, you are not to think of your family, and you are not even to think of your generation. You are to make decisions based on the 7th generation to come. Right? That's the law. That's the natural law.
Now say that again. Say, I don't think that was understood. Say that one more time.
Leaders are to make decisions with the 7th generation in mind. What will my great, 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 great grandchildren know or have as a result of my decision now? And my argument was that this is a natural human proclivity, tendency. We always are thinking about what's to come after us. And so out of respect for that law, you cannot demolish this house because the 7th generation would much rather have the story of Cab and Blanche Calloway and Andrew Reed than an empty parking, or, a park, a lot.
So how did the home?
They completely ignored that argument. That was like not even on the script. That was like some kind of comical thing to them.
The home itself.
No, that argument, that Native American type that takes precedence. I think it's called sui generis. It's a unique natural law, and it's the same rights enjoyed by mountains and trees and rivers. It's like your natural inheritance as being born here. And that's what I was saying. Citizens of Baltimore have a right, a natural inheritance to this story because it makes them better.
Right.
And then, but that wasn't important. What was important was the fact that Cab's grandfather was Andrew Reed, a president of the United Brotherhood of Liberty. And that is significant because that was really the first known civil rights organization in American history. And so I think my telling this story... and
was it out of Baltimore?
Yes, it was out of Baltimore. So the story is this. When the Civil War ended, Maryland was not eligible for Reconstruction because it wasn't a slave state.
It was right on the border, yeah.
So these group of men had formed this organization, which was the precursor to the NAACP and something like the Black Panthers, because it was covert, it was underground. And they enforced the Emancipation Proclamation on the streets of Baltimore. And Cab Calloway's grandfather, in fact, his whole family was involved with this organization. And so that was what was really important. But it's still, I think even that falls under the larger argument that I was trying to make about the fact that Native American history, Native Americans have rights. You know what I mean? They have privileges. They have certain titles as a result of their turning over or surrendering or being kicked off or eliminated from this land. Even though they're no longer here, they still have precedence as by the long period of time with which they
what do you think we can do with that tidbit of knowledge, but actually make the powers that be actually live up to the law? Yeah. That they created, that they supposedly uphold.
Well, I think first, we got to let everybody know that hey, you may have this life now, but your life is really for what you can leave, what you can give to others when you're gone, because it's only finite and you blink your eyes and it's over. So I think that's the first thing. We shift our value system to that instead of being, what can I take and keep for myself right now?
Right.
And I think this is fundamental to understanding colonialism and slavery and all that. See, to Native Americans, the goal is harmony. Live in peace with each other, with the environment, with everything. But
balance.
With colonialism, it's how can I use this for my pleasure?
Right.
And so this is why, Native Americans don't have things like, or didn't have at the time, fans or air conditioning or even the concept of slavery. Because I'm going to look at you as a man and I'm seeking harmony with you as a man. I want to understand you, as opposed to others who look at you as a man and say, oh, how can I use this guy to make money? You know what I mean? To enrich my life.
Right.
So I think you have to kind of rewind and come back to that and say, hey, this is what we value. We value the things that we can help our next generation with. And then you start making decisions based on that.
So jumping backwards a little bit, what was the message in your personal family, like in terms of Calloway's legacy, or just how do we save this? Because at some point he moved out of the home. Yeah. And it was left to family members, or?
No. Well, I mean, they moved as a family to, I can't remember that community, Arlington something, I can't remember. But they moved to another part of Baltimore because...
by like the square?
I can't even remember.
By Lafayette, in that area over there.
It was an area of like rich blacks and stuff. And the reason being because, and this goes back again to Cab being the original G and hip hop founded in Baltimore, he was a thug. He was running numbers. He was at the racetrack all the time. He was selling afros, but he was making money. He was driving a big car, by the time he was a senior at Douglas. I mean, it was unheard of. And he was hustling. He was working 4 jobs. He was an elevator operator. He was a stable boy. He was an afro seller, and he loved to play craps. His mom caught him playing craps on a Sunday morning when he was supposed to be at church. She's the church organist. And he writes in the book, he said, I was ready to shake them dice and I was pulling that. My mom grabbed my hand and everybody ran. All the other boys ran.
Oh, wow.
And she said, boy, what are you doing up here? And that's when they realized he was out of control, and they took him to, Pennsylvania, where he had to go to a boarding school, and they tried to reform him. But when he came back from Pennsylvania, they were still at Druid Hill Avenue, but they said, yeah, he's fallen back into this life again. So let's move him out of this environment and get him someplace and try to get him out of school, which was a struggle. I still don't know if he graduated from Douglas. He went to school there, but I don't know if he ever got the degree. So
I didn't even know he went to Douglas.
Yeah.
So we're going to take another quick commercial break. We'll be right back here on the Artist Exchange Radio Show. Don't go anywhere with Mr. Peter Brooks. And you untouched.
Listen to this flashback of Skyline Radio Show.
So where we at? Where we talk about the effects and what's going on in these schools, and what people don't understand. Just real briefly, I just want to talk a little bit about what people say bullying is or is not. So bullying comes in many forms. It's a teasing, it's the cyberbullying, it's the texting, it's the phone calls, it's the posting of pictures and people's personal information to pretty much cause them harm, to have them feel insecure. It's the sex assaults that people actually put out there. There are physical assaults, and there are mental assaults and emotional assaults. And what I like to remind individuals that any aggressive behavior towards anyone that is unwanted and unwarranted, and an individual asks you to stop. Let's stop there. Stop.
And they should be respecting that.
Respecting that and respecting yourself, because when you're able to respect another person, you're able to respect yourself. And the way that you're able to show that respect is that you know that you have a gift and you know you're uniquely made and that you matter, and then you also acknowledge that the next person beside you matters as well.
Right.
You know, and we lose that sometimes. Bullying is a behavior that underestimates the lives and legacy of you. I'm sure when they was bullying me, and I'm sure when they was bullying you, they didn't understand who you're going to become later on. I didn't know.
Right, because I'm popping. I can't pop. All right, let me tell you, all those people who felt like they wanted to say whatever to me, look at me now. It's like, no, y'all don't understand, but I've been through some things, okay?
And you know what? No. I applaud you and I salute you, because a lot of times we do not take the time to say, I'm okay, and I'm okay with me, and there's nothing wrong with me, and I'm amazing, and I'm blessed, and I'm strong, and I matter.
Join us every Wednesday at 7 p.m. for Skyline Radio Show, only on BeExposedRadio.com.
at the hip, tell me you like, think we should go for another round. Baby, try not to say too much, let your love come down.
You are listening to BeExposedRadio.com.
Like they actually teach themselves their history and who they are, and is a part of it is legacy. So they learn their legacy and their family tree. And I was like, we don't do that. We have immediate family members that our family didn't really deal with, so we don't deal with, and then we meet subsequently, or
and then we're like, it's true, it's really true, and we can't hold on to that. I mean, we have to find the value in each other, but from a point of harmony as opposed to exploitation and looking down on them and stuff like that. Well, he's just a garbage man, or he's just a Uber driver, or something. What is he going to do for me? And so I'm not going to deal with him, even though he's family.
So welcome back to the Artist Exchange Radio Show. We're back here live. I have finally got Peter Brooks on the show, and I because I kept seeing you places, and we kept running into each other, and I was like, I remember him from that one show that we did together, and I just never knew, and it really until recently when I saw that YouTube clip that I knew who your family was, and that didn't make a difference, but it was just interesting information, because I'm meeting all of these individuals that have this rich history, and now because I'm around so many artists, I'm starting to see what that was like, knowing somebody as they were building to a certain level of success, and it forces me to not just connect with them because they're successful, but really watching people and studying people, because you never know who you're sitting across with. And one of the bittersweet things about going to Coppin is we had such a rich history, but we're known as North Avenue University, as if it's kind of like a shadow or a cloud over our head. And we just don't know who we're in the midst of. We don't know. I remember Dorothy Heights coming to Coppin.
Yep, I remember.
And it's like,
magic.
We don't know who we're in the midst of until they actually die and move on. And we like, she was just here. She was on our campus.
Bobby Seale came to Coppin. President of Black Panthers, Julian Bond came to Coppin. Cornel West came to Coppin. And I mean, this is the importance of the academic institution. It's the cultural factory, if you will, for the neighborhood. It's the place where if Cornel West wanted to talk to Baltimore, he should do it at Coppin rather than at the Meyerhoff or the Royal Farms, So it's extremely important, and that's the thing. This is the real key, is that when anybody comes to Baltimore, they should check in at Coppin, you know what I mean, and just big up Coppin, because the young people looking at it be like, oh wow, I gotta go, because you never know who's going to show up.
And this is our academic black institutions, our lower educations, meaning elementary, middle, high school, churches. We're just not connected.
I mean, imagine if Spike Lee, when he came to Baltimore, showed up at Coppin. Just showed up, you know what I mean? It would do so much for that school and the admissions.
And we know that. We know the power that some of us have, but we leverage it for what we could get, or who has the bigger crowd. Which is that
colonial mentality
and
again.
It's sad to me.
We're thinking of how it benefits us, and not how it puts us in harmony with that.
And we're now being groomed to do that even in our building process. The moment you get any type of notoriety, we begin to distance ourselves from each other, and it becomes difficult. I've had artists who started, when I was starting this, and then they went viral or got a big break, and now I got to go through this person to get to that person to even ask a question, and we're like, no, we're too busy. We're, what's your demographic? And it was the same when you first got here. But we are taught to kind of separate ourselves once success looks like it's possible.
Because now we're part of them.
Right.
We're no longer a part of you. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Or the us is gone.
Yeah.
And it's now just me. And we become so much the individual and that collective.
And I tell you the truth, I think a lot of it has to do with the anxiety that they feel in terms of just getting the next gig. You know what I mean? Like even, Robert Townsend or highly successful people, Denzel Washington, they're living up to their means. And so it's gig to gig. And I ain't got time for you because I got this script and I'm going to try to, so it really catches you up. And I mean, it's like Bob said, rat race.
Yeah, it's sad. It's unfortunate. My question that I asked you during the break was, how much of this information was something that you already had, or how did you gather it?
I'm gonna tell you the absolute secret, and this is why I was so passionate about the house and how it gave so much meaning to my life. As soon as I found it, was the fact that when I started spending time at the house with the knowledge I had of my grandfather's music, I began to see that so much of his personality, so much of his music was formed by that neighborhood and that experience. I mean, Smokey Joe, the people he sang about, Minnie the Moocher, the Reefer Man. That's Pennsylvania Avenue, and they're still there.
Yep.
It's still Minnie the Moocher running around there. So that really was how it infused. And then I started to put these pieces together, and I was like, wait a minute. He's singing about a woman on drugs, a dude selling drugs, and a dude who uses drugs and is messing with this girl. But that's different from what Louis Armstrong was singing about. That's different from what Nat King Cole was singing about. That's different from what Billy Eckstein was singing about.
But at that time, you had variations of who we were. Lorraine Hansberry or the big figures that were trying to write about the possibilities of who we could be.
That's the Renaissance.
Versus who we really were. Like, I know it was real controversial at that time to write in a vernacular.
Like simple, like Langston Hughes. Yeah.
So it was like we are so Huxtable. We're not this. That's not who we are. We don't want to be working class anymore. Everybody wanted to be, in fashion or in style.
I think that's a great point. Yeah, and at the same time that we were dictating the fashion and the style, and I mean, look at the way in which people carried themselves back then. If you look back at the old movies and the way they dressed and stuff like that, and so we had this sense that because we were naive and we were just sort of out of slavery and getting toward integration, we had this sense that it was accessible to us and we could do it.
But we had to change who we were. If we fixed our hair and we looked the part, then they would accept us. And that mentality has gotten to this generation that we're in right now. And it's sad to watch people change and
instead
push
of being
back
who they are,
and being who they are and accepting their family. And that's why in the beginning I said I wish I would have, not necessarily lived up to like my family's current at that time, but just embraced who we were, because I wouldn't have been running from it.
Yes.
And I felt like we often run away from our history. And in the meantime, somebody back there erasing it.
Yes, or taking it and making money off of it. And how much, I think it's really true. I think, and this kind of relates to Cab in that, I believe in certain ways he was America's first multiculturalist, or true multiculturalist, in that for him, race didn't matter. He was light enough to be accepted by the whites at the Cotton Club, let's face it, it's true. But even though there were some dark stars back then, they had to be like, whoa, talents like Bill Bojangles.
But they still wouldn't show their face.
No, and they were ashamed of it in a sense, But then you had for him, he was light enough to get by. He identified as black no matter what. They would be like, oh, Mr. Calloway, why don't you join us at the country club? No. Why don't you sit in the front? No, I'm not. I'm with the band. You know what I mean? And the band has a separate car, and that's the way you want it. Right. So he was always throwing that in people's faces. He was also arrested over civil rights things. He walked into a club in Kansas City in the front door, and they said, no, and they said, and they were like, guys, this is Cab Calloway, and they were, I don't care.
So, and I was asking you during the break. So the home that we're trying to save, he actually moved out of that home as what, a teenager?
In 1926, yeah. He moved there in 1915, so he spent 9 years there. And yes, that home is the foundation of his personality and his relationship with Blanche. That was the last place where it took place. In the book, he says he moved to his grandmother Reed's house, which is that home, and that's how Andrew Reed's connection comes in. But that house tells stories. It talks.
And we're going to get back to the story when we return. Don't go anywhere. We got to pay another bill. We'll be right back here on the Artist Exchange Radio Show, only on BigExposedRadio.com. So I think.
Take a minute and listen to this flashback of the Artist Exchange Radio Show.
Any trouble, because I get into any trouble, but I had a problem that this then became a discussion at that workplace environment. Now, the discussion was I should have been more sensitive. In what way was my first response? And I guess when I had to meet with that said person who had the issue with the person who was said leader of that organization. I said, well, to that person, how would I have known that? Well, you should have asked.
I think so. You want my opinion?
It was a circle, and I was willing to go on that merry-go-round.
You are better than most.
Yeah.
I think that's normal when you're in a group and there's norming. Most of the time when you're in new work environments or you're in a space where you're getting to know people, it's normal now to ask for people's preferred pronouns. You wouldn't have known that.
Normal to who? What is normal?
Well, you work in social. You work in social innovation and
my pronouns, so it's not normal to me.
You don't, but I think because I feel like the person was probably offended because they felt like you were not honoring whoever they are, right? But you wouldn't have known that.
Still to this moment, I don't know what their pronouns are. So in that
they didn't offer
circle, we still don't know. So I'll go as far as saying I perceive.
You are listening to BeExposedRadio.com.
We don't learn about each other in that way, because of course you all saw that as just granddad. You knew he was a musician and he did these things around the world, but he was just granddad at the time.
Right. And we didn't put together when we first heard Sugar Hill Gang that, hey, granddad was doing this kind of thing back in the 30s, you know what I mean?
And you may have heard samples of his music. So what is it now, like Christmas time, or because the song that I added,
Little Child?
Yeah, I add certain things that I just remember from Christmas or jazz music in general, and just I remember just hearing these songs and knowing who now as an adult, knowing who the person is, but just it's a part of just the culture.
Yeah.
So how is it now hearing his music and realizing he's not even connected to his legacy anymore?
Yeah. Well, you see how...
Well, the legal aspect of it, that is.
Yeah, well, I mean, it really, for me, what I've gotten a lot of pleasure in doing is deconstructing this music and then looking at how it plays into both the Harlem Renaissance and Black empowerment. And so, you know, like you take a song like A Bee Gazette, which was actually a Jewish song sung by a Native American leading a black band. Go figure, you know, that's what I mean about multiculturalism. And, you know, in that song, he's saying, you know, I'm Hink the Dink, the solid sender, a really good friend of Mrs. Bender, Bender Schmender, a big gazin, I'm the cat that's in the know. And this is a black man saying this in 1937. 10 years after we were expected to perform in blackface.
Oh, wow.
So, and that's really the origin of hip hop. It's like we are identifying who we are. I'm the man around here. I'm the one who can do this, and I'm the one who can do that. And that's where, you know, I think it comes in. And those are the kind of stories that house tells, is how you can, because these were the first people to deploy that strategy of getting out of the hood. And so it gives you context of how that came about. I mean, I really think that house binds like 90 years of African American music, because you look at Cab Calloway started swing, and let's say like the jitterbug, right? Maybe you've heard of that. That was the Cab Calloway innovation, and the jitterbug now, the way that dance goes and everything, and then you look at the way the traffic comes down Druid Hill Avenue. You know, it's something there about the pace of North Avenue and everything that rhythm and music are infused by. You look at his choreography, man. I'm telling you, people walk differently in different parts of the city. You walk differently in Fells Point than you do from Roland Park than you do at North and Penn.
But what is weird to me and what is strange is, well, often our musicians from that time didn't really receive anything unless they had a special connection. Billie Holiday died with a couple $100 taped to her leg, and you hear all the many stories. Ma Rainey, all these people who died
penniless.
Yeah. But even with him, he's still, you know, many of them live on. But he's seen in cartoons.
Yeah.
He's seen, I remember the whole Janet Jackson video where that was the zoot suit, the idea of just his style, his music, like you said, the choreography, just the words, the essence of who he was. You see him in film and so many different aspects.
It's big, man, and nobody knew it at the time. It's sort of like Mozart and Salieri, you know. Nobody knew it at the time, but really, I mean, it's so big, and that's why I can only compare that house and 2216 Druid Hill Avenue and that area to something like Graceland. You know, it's just as big as Elvis Presley, but a lot bigger because you're hitting on so many different aspects of the civilization or the culture. And you've got the story of this brother and sister, which is inspirational for any family, you know what I mean?
So is there any thought, well, who owns his music now?
His music's in the public domain, as far as I know. There was a rights dispute between my brother and my aunt, and my aunt is still, you know, she lives in New Mexico, and she's the one who's in favor of the demolition and stuff, and so... yeah, it's and they never resolved it, so it's out there. Now my brother holds pretty much the copyright to the name and the orchestra and stuff like that, but I don't know, we didn't think about that, because here's the thing, and
public domain, though.
But we weren't thinking of themselves. Cab's father died when he was just a small boy, and he was never really got close to his father because he was a troubled individual. We don't know how he died. They said he died in a mental institution. We think it was suicide. It might have been one of them things with Malcolm X, you know, where his father died. The point being that, I mean, unlike Malcolm, who, let's say, or most people who would become angry at the fact that their father was taken away from him, in Cab, it touched a profound sadness. And so if you listen to his music, the ontology of it is to really prevent people from taking their lives. It's to fight against depression, loneliness, alienation, all of those things that we experience, that he saw his father suffering from. And so as a result, it's this sort of gift to our people now, especially because here's the difference between him and hip hop. When he left that area, all of the anger, all of the hatred toward women, the misogyny, all of the frustration and stayed there. You never see it in his music at all. And his music is not, you know, Sambo stuff. It's just love life stuff.
It often was used in that way. I remember seeing glimpses of who he was in like Bugs Bunny, and you know Bugs Bunny was controversial because it got to that Sambo side, and it got, but that was matter of fact back then.
That's just the way it was.
Right.
But that's the thing, is that, you know, you've got this tremendous gift. So Cab is on this mission, and the money comes, and that's fine. But he's like Bob Marley in that respect. He is on a mission from God, if you will, or he is a driven individual. So the money is great, and of course, if he didn't have a wife, and most of the time he was living in New York as a young man. He was living in hotels, man. He didn't even have a home, you know, until he moved to Long Island. So he was, you know, and his thing was to be successful, to give opportunities to people. One of the main reasons why Cab Calloway became famous, period, is because he paid his musicians on time. If he said he was going to give you money for something, He gave you that money, and people respected that, and that's why they went the extra mile for him. That's why when Milt Hinton was asked to join his band, it was like the dream of a lifetime, because he knew he was going to get paid. So,
have you met any or been able to talk to any of the people that may be connected to him in any way? Or?
Yeah, I have. There's a guy in Delaware I'm in touch with, and a few other people, and of course people are coming forward and talking about how he impacted their lives and stuff. But you know, it's and I even have a pay stub from one of his musicians, you know, Milt Hinton, who kept all that stuff. So it's just a lot to it. And again, I got to go back to Blanche, and she's been sort of undermining this thing, and maybe you'll have me, or better yet, have my aunt, his daughter, come and talk about Blanche, because Blanche was a band leader, 1926.
When that was unheard of.
Absolutely unheard of. And it's not like being a singer like Ella Fitzgerald or Billie Holiday, where you come in and everything's done and you just record this and then you can go home. No, Blanche she was responsible for the music. She was responsible for hiring and firing the musicians. She was responsible for transportation. She was responsible for getting them fed. She was responsible for lodging. She was responsible for all the choreography, how the show went, negotiating the venue, when does it start, when does it start, what, you know, how are we going to distribute the money? All of that. She was the orchestra conductor, the leader of the orchestra.
Did she get that credit? Because I've heard of her, but not in a sense of having that type of authority over his career.
No. And not even that type of authority over society.
And that's probably because she was a woman and a black woman at that.
That is the point. And that's why I think it's important. And again, for our women to know that story, because Blanche's thing was not easy. You know, she was arrested in 1937 in Mississippi for using a white women's bathroom. Yes, at a gas station. That almost destroyed her career. Yeah, she was older than him by about 7 years, I think. Yeah, and that almost destroyed her career. And all of the challenges that she went through as being that sort of sex symbol that she was in the 1920s. I mean, my mom tells this great story of how, you know, she went to see Blanche behind the thing. She's like, "Child, can you bring me some potato chips?" Because they won't let me eat this stuff, you know what I mean? Because I got to keep my figure, and she was craving it. So all of those challenges. Blanche then became a manager, the Crystal Caverns in D.C. She found Ruth Brown there. She managed Ruth Brown's career. Ruth Brown was considered the queen of soul at her time until Aretha came and took the title from her. And after that, she went to Miami, where she was a radio station executive. She may have been one of the first black female disc jockeys ever. She certainly was the first radio station owner or manager at that time. And she was in Miami. Came back to Baltimore, where she ran her own mail order business for 10 years. But, you know, she married her childhood sweetheart from Douglas, who was dying at the time, and said, "Look, I got all this. I ain't got no kids. Blanche, why don't you come up here? I know you're struggling."
So, and thinking...
But that's cooperation. It's working together. It's
but thinking about those generations in your family, what is the plan if the house does become available to you?
Wow, that's heavy. I mean,
or to the community.
I think it's gotta have some type of, it's gotta have some type of community discussion and stuff. Because here's the thing, planning the park is cool, but that's Cab Calloway's house. That's Blanche Calloway's house. That's Andrew Reed's house. All right, so let's think. Well, now that we know this, what's our next step? I mean, I'm not going to do something that's not what, you know what I mean, the people want. All I'm saying to them is, before you do that, think about it, because this is a resource. It's something you can leverage for jobs and, you know, income and that kind of thing. And you know, once it's gone, you can't replace it again.
I'm trying to think of the other space that's around in that area that's now kind of like a community center. It's right next to the Upton. It's like maybe a block from, it's on Pennsylvania.
Chicken Bake.
No, it's a couple blocks up. It's like right past the post office. But it's like a museum now, and I cannot think of the name.
Lily Carroll Jackson.
Yeah,
that's another museum all kids need to go to,
yeah.
you know, and know your history. So, Yeah, I think ideally for me, I mean, gosh, I don't know. I would love to see something where we combine like entertainment or music production with the marketing. You could come to this place and over 2 weeks, if you're a musician, you record your music, you perform live, you get your Facebook page, you get your website, you get your everything done for you while you're recording the songs, interviews,
more
and
like
all that stuff.
DIY.
Exactly. Time you come out, we've already sold the tickets for your first venue, and we've shown you how we did it, and you can just keep doing that from there, so that we're really launching people's career in a practical way. Another thing I would love to see, and I mean, it's pie in the sky or whatever, but I don't know if you've ever been to Williamsburg. They recreate the colonial experience perfectly.
Where's
our Williamsburg? Why can't we recreate the Harlem Renaissance here in Baltimore, right there?
So that's the question I'm going to leave you with, and we'll be right back. We got a little bit more time left in the show, but we're going to go to another commercial break. We'll be right back here on the Artist Exchange Radio Show, only on BeExposedRadio.com. Don't go anywhere. That's a really good question.
First they love you, then desert you, leave with a plate full with no spoon. Ain't no space, I can't escape negativity. I got used to the taste, I've been bad, burned, then fucked over. But remain strong through the Passover. Kicking haters out of the way like masked over. Roll up, sip something, let it pass over. Who would I be? It ain't the man to me that let the next man take advantage of me. When that storm come, no pan I see. Get with it, not without it, then you'll see. I beat the haters, they know I'm greater. That's why they buzzing for the elevator. But I can't save it, it'll be too loud on the pedal stool. Don't carry fakers, always got your hand out demanding favors. When I just looked out, now you need more paper. I can't breathe, give me 3 feet. I never let y'all be the death of me. When my patient run that, yeah, nigga OT, cause they wanna see me down like I'm NCT. 6 words, get the fuck away from me, say I help you out if you can help yourself. I keep the G till I DIE. Now excuse me while I get back to PC. HOP ain't used to sleep while your third eye always on me. I'm stacking green just to feed the team. My boo, she know that I'm king with chasing my dream. These niggas it seems I rip them, trash them, then put on new jeans. Man, see the problem is, man, you know, I keep it 100, man. Yeah, man, like if I got it, then you got it. Yeah, man, but if I don't got it, then I'ma give it. You feel me? But I definitely got you through the ride, man. Let's get it, yo.
I'm really getting tired of ungrateful ass niggas. They really about to turn me to a hateful ass nigga. Like I was never there when you never had figures. Pull triggers for you niggas when you caught up in the trenches. Man, I really don't get it.
Exposed Radio.
Well, if you made them, take care of them.
Yeah, that's the real. You right. That's the real deal.
It's period.
Right. And all that old money shouldn't go toward this, money should go to. If the child is with one of the parents 24/7, 7 days a week, you don't even come get your child every day. You come get your child once a month maybe, or once every 3 months.
Right.
You cannot dictate where that money goes, especially if the child ain't calling you about nothing. Now if the child calling you every week, then you can question about where the child support is going. But if every time you pick up the child, they look nice, they ain't complaining about nothing, why are you worrying about where the money go at?
It is what it is. Radio show.
You are listening to BeExposedRadio.com.
Center, it hurt me to see where, like, what value do we put on certain culture's legacy? Mm-hmm. Like what becomes significant history and what becomes, that was cute. You know, I remember us cleaning out the basement of the Pill Center and finding all of these plaques and all of these awards with Smoke's name on it. And this, you know, people not knowing what to do with it. Like, do we throw it away? He didn't want it. So what do we do with it? But that was a part of history. Like, you didn't get those awards just because you were mad, but you did great things. So how do you suggest we begin that big hurdle uphill, really exploring our legacy? Because once Cab Calloway's house is saved, then this person was like, well, my uncle was this and my grandmother was this, and like, how do we? I want to see that avalanche of legacy building and preserving of our history. Like I think that's the area that I'm trying to gravitate towards. But how do we jumpstart that in a way?
And how do we decide? Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's no decision because we all got a device and we can all record a story, but how do we jumpstart it in a way where the politics doesn't get in the way? It doesn't tell us what's valid and what's not valid. Because you're fighting on the validity of your grandfather's history right now. If it was anybody else, everything would have been paused. It would have been big,
Or if it was any other city, really, just about. I mean, but
why here? What happened?
Gosh, man, I do not get it. And the only thing I can think of is the fact that we didn't use this as a tourist opportunity, even though Schaefer was trying to get us there, because we're just so.
In terms of what? What do you mean when you said?
I mean, his idea of marketing the city as Charm City, and then Cab was a part of that.
Oh, with like the harbor.
Yeah, his idea was to try to generate income through tourism. That we'd be like Paris or something. We don't have any real big economy, thing in here. And I mean, now we got Under Armour and whatever, but. Or Geico, but his thing was like, yeah, let's bring tourism and let's make this a charming city or an American destination. So your
grandfather was on board with that?
Well, he accepted the key from Mayor Schaefer. He wasn't, too involved in Baltimore and stuff like that. I mean, he was again hustling.
But he was used as a key figure to say, hey, this person is from here,
and this is a great city as a result.
Wow.
Yeah, so
and now he's gone.
But we were ashamed. We're ashamed to bring people from New York into that area because of the way it looks and what goes on there and stuff like that. And we're ashamed to bring,
But they would be the ones that would buy into it quicker than anybody that's here.
Toward outsiders. If you don't, I'll tell you. But here's the other thing. I think the first thing we have to do really is value each other. We have to make a conscious effort that we are going to appreciate,
I think we've lost value in our own significance and importance. I had just wrote on my post, it's just, I make observations about stuff, and I was talking to some younger artists, and I was angry at them because they were charging people based off of what they had to pay for, like their bills right now. And the young guy was like, well, my cell phone bill due, and I got to help my mom with her BGE, so that's why I charged him that. I was like, but do you realize that man was willing to pay more for that?
Yeah, that has nothing to do with your value.
Right, but you have to, your BGE has nothing at all to do with your value.
That's right.
And as you building, your value will grow, but we have to take stock and take value in who we are.
And there's the key. How do you create value?
Well, how do you tap into or make people aware of their value?
Through production, through radio and television shows like this, through production, actually doing stuff, writing things, making things, doing things, showing up. Showing up is half the battle, you know?
And this forced me to reach out because at one time, it's not that I wouldn't have seen the significance in who you were, but it's more so now I really value being in some non-black artist spaces. I really value my history and the history of the people around me more. So one of the things that I do when I come on here, I ask people who they are. I really could care less what you're selling. Like the fact your granddad's house is going to be saved or not. And what happens about the story though? Like what happens with the story? Some of this information could be sent, because I saw representation of him in the New Smithsonian Museum, but not in terms of artifact or story. And this could be a significant part of a place like that being built for us. But we have that place here in the Reginald F. Lewis Museum and the Blacks and Wax Museum. We have those things here to kind of anchor us, but we've lost sight of who we are and what value we have. Because we're now trying to compete with people who are secretly competing with us, and we're not focused on our lane enough to be able to say our history. My biggest regrets, and my grandmother had 17 children, and out of all of them there's only 3 left. and it's tapping me on my shoulder like, Nate, go to them and get the family story now. Where they in their right mind to remember it, and because I regret not getting that or spending more time with my great grandmother. I don't know many people in my age range at that time some of them live with grandparents, but none of them live with a great grandparent.
That's true.
And I couldn't remember, a time where I didn't have her. In that moment when we lost her, she physically died in our home, and realizing all that history is gone now. And her 3 surviving children have bits and pieces of what their part of her story was.
Right.
But they have no idea about what her story was.
But why is that important to you?
Because I see families dying off.
It makes you rich.
Right, that's what
your wealth. It's your inheritance.
Look at the black people who got their 40 acres in a mule and it wasn't taken back, or they kept that home in the South. Look at how rich their family history is. And I think Tyler Perry tapped into that and gave us an image of what that looked like. We started in Poetic Justice with that big family reunion scene, but that idea of people being able to have a legacy. And those families aren't necessarily richer than other families, but they have a place to go to. They have like that big home, Big Mama's house down south, like that becomes a mecca for that family.
And no matter how bad things get or how bad you get treated, can always go home.
Right, it's that idea. Yeah. And I see, even within my own family, I see that rapidly leaving us and not having that. We're not family the same way anymore.
Yeah, losing the very base. And that and it's frightening to me. I mean, when I was growing up, coming to Baltimore, you'd see people everywhere.
Now not so much.
So it looks like genocide. It looks like a deliberate effort to.
And that's the word, deliberate. Deliberate, and that's the part.
And this house is ethnocide, which is a form of genocide. And we've got a mayor and all these people who are black who are sitting over it. I could see if it was a white guy saying, "Yeah, your history don't matter," but they're young. This is your history, man.
And that's what you claim you were about all this time, and now you're in a seat and you're not doing anything about it. Yeah. That's the part that is hurtful to me. Like, I don't even watch the local news anymore. It's just hurtful to see our legacy being turned into other things. And it feels like we're selling off parts of ourselves for what? A title, a job position, another notch on our resume.
Greed, yeah. Ultimately greed.
But we're going to take another break. We're at the 30-minute mark of our second hour, so we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back with Peter Brooks.
Yes, thank you. Awesome.
And listen to this flashback of the Black by Demand radio show.
Control. They said she wouldn't so they didn't know if she had a weapon.
So it's just a mess. So yeah, you do have to have these discussions with your children.
You do, and you have to make them aware of that there is an enemy out there. Every time the police pull you over, or every time you have an interaction with the police as a black person, you are at risk of being in front of your enemy. Hopefully, it's not a police officer that wants to demonstrate that he's your enemy, but we all see it's a high probability of that being the case. So if we're not talking to our children do not have the coping mechanisms to deal with these type of intense situations. What they're going to do is what most of us do as black people, me and anyone else, which is become emotional. And that is the trigger point for the police. They know that black people are emotional people. So when they arrive on the scene, they are purposely trying to say and do things to you to get your emotions up, right? And then once they get your emotions up, then it's like, oh, that's what we needed. Now we're going to kick your ass. You know what I'm saying? Gotcha. You know, so I'm saying we need to have these discussions with our children, you know, and make them understand.
You are listening to BeExposedRadio.com.
We know that much about that man's life. And we never thought to make a story about the loneliest monk. Like, and I'm not shading him, it's just the idea of that's our story. And we're letting someone else, now he owns the rights to that story. And it's a brilliant piece.
One of us or something bringing us along,
And that's the issue with diversity in our city. Welcome back.
Thank you.
The issue with diversity in this city is diversity normally means I fit you in where the grant says I have to. But you're not at the planning meeting, you're not at the budget meeting, you're not at the decision-making meetings. You're normally there to give me information or to display the final result or buy a ticket. But we're never on the planning phase.
Well, there's a certain fear of you because they don't know what you're going to say, what you're going to do, how you're going to act. You know what I mean? And what based on what they might say or do or have, you know, act or their plans are. And so, you know, I look at it this way. You know, from the time I knew him, you know, no matter what room he was in, whether it was the Kennedy Center or the Hollywood Bowl or Radio City Music Hall, Cab Calloway was the toughest dude in the room.
It's interesting how you speak of him. You speak of him as he's this character. And not, you know, denying any relationship to him, but it seems like you've always looked at him as this larger than life person,
as opposed to granddad,
right? Like, where did that connection not happen?
Well, it's why I was kind of disappointed with the response from the city. It's the fact that, you know, when we were with my grandfather, no matter how drunk he was or how bad he felt or anything, all right, or how much we cared about him, he was sick or whatever. If a fan knocked on that dressing room door, if a fan was in conversation with him, you as the family member took a backseat because this is what I'm doing. You know what I mean? This is how I do. So the sacrifice was everything for the fans. You know, everything to make him who he is.
There's so many artists that have that story, and you have to, because I can't live this life without them.
And that's what we're asking Baltimore. We can't have this man without us making a sacrifice. And the sacrifice is the park.
Who he was.
You know what I mean? It's and we would do it joyfully because it was, you know.
But many people on that side of the argument are like, well, won't you go talk to the UB Blake? Maybe they'll give you a room and you can dedicate it to. But we normally have to squish all of our history into this. And even when we do have those outlets, nobody thinks of, well, you know, I see him struggling, let's give them a wing or give them. We don't think like that.
Gosh, I know.
We do not think like that. Somebody made a wax figure of him and put him. And I don't even think I saw a wax figure of him in the Black and Wax Museum.
It's not there. It's not there. We're afraid. We're afraid if we get on one side that's going to put us against the other side, and we can't deal with that side because they are the ones with the money or the power or the whatever you want. So we're afraid to support each other. We're afraid to take a risk, you know, and say, look, I'm gonna go out there, I'm gonna support this show. I don't care what it does to me or my career or how you think about me. Yeah,
Well, you're
we're afraid
there
to do that.
filming. I think it was like 2 or 3 times you've been there filming. What has people passing by? What are they asking? Because I know that community is like, what you doing here?
Yeah.
Are you getting that response from them?
Some of them do, and they, they engage me and I engage them, and we have a great time and stuff like that together, talking about the history. I really wanted to just put a chair down there and a speaker and just start talking, and telling people the history, or even singing his songs or anything like that. But
a block party.
Yeah, at the last Druid Heights meeting that I tried to attend, and they wouldn't let me come in. They said to me, they made it really clear. They were like, "Look, whatever you do here, we're not going to respect it."
What?
And so that's why I said, "All right, I hear you. I'll take a step back."
And you know what? And that takes me, and that's when the angry South Baltimore Nathan comes out, because
but that was their position too. They were angry about something,
Yeah, but the idea of this city being sold off for parts, as if we're like a junk car or something, angers me. And it's just the idea of, it takes me back to when the Freddie Ray riots happened. I remember that Saturday the week before that happened at Mondawmin, and then the city went in its chaos. I remember being at, what's the place that's over there off of Martin Luther King Boulevard, that Orchard Muse community?
Yeah.
It's not the NAACP, it's the other place. I remember sitting in there, and the great that they continue to do. They have programs and all that. I remember the director, the president of that, older black man, coming up, and we were doing something on vegan living or something, and we asked him, because the buzz in the air that something was going to happen, and he said, well, those young people can go out there and do that, but I've been there and I've done that. I'm gonna go have me a meeting with the powers that be and have my own conversation. And I remember being so uneasy about that statement, because it's disjointed. And it wasn't because, back in his day when he was that young person, it was young people going out there doing it, but it was older people testing them and putting them down and giving them tests and making them stronger.
I used to tell people like this at Coppin all the time. Coppin is almost like a cruise. If you don't say to the cruise director that you want to play shuffleboard, we're not going to bring out the shuffleboard. So you got to show up, and you got to tell people, I want you to take care of my neighborhood, or I want you to include me in this meeting, and just you can't take no for an answer. And I mean, we know how to do that.
They're debating on getting streets repaired, and I see them doing this in the Park Heights community now, where they're offering people a lifetime of Section 8 if they move out. Like this tricking us into believing we're not good enough, or we only.
Or as soon as we get rid of you, we can fix this.
Yeah, and that's. I hate that, because that community is so rich in just the history alone. I was so angry when that AME church decided to tear down that building that was adjacent to it.
Civil rights.
Right. I was like, and I understand you paying for it and it's in decay, but where's the facade? Where's the monument to it? You still own the land, you're still paying the taxes for it, but where's the legacy of it? Did you teach the young people at your church what that space was? No. Like, I know they didn't. I grew up in that church. No.
Wow.
And it was just never there. And that whole area, that Druid Heights area, it has so much. And look at what Booker T has become. It just makes me angry thinking about how but it's our fault. They created the institutional racism, but we've let it happen. We've adopted it. And now it's our cloak. It's our coat that we walk around on. And it keeps us warm to know that we have at least this. I got at least this, but I got to get mine. You get yours.
Before you get yours, I'm going to get mine.
Right.
That's the mentality.
Or I have mine, go get yours.
Yeah. And I guess, people thinking I was out for this for my own, gain or something like that. And I mean, I'm really not thinking of myself. myself, you know what I mean? I get the Betty Shabazz speech every night, you know, the Malcolm, what are you doing? You're doing all this for them. They don't care about you. You're going to end up with nothing. You know, think about your family, blah, blah, blah.
But it's just, I mean, when I went and looked, because I went back to look at it, I was like, well, I think that was him on that video. And when I went to look back, I actually was listening to, because I wasn't even listening to what you were saying the first time.
The whole scene, yeah.
Yeah, and because I just saw a camera looking at the abandoned homes, and when there's a white person talking, it makes me perk up.
And people think I'm white. I mean, I can't help it.
I mean, I knew you wasn't.
Right, but if
anybody that looks at you,
yeah.
But
my mom, even my mom, be like, "Who's that white boy over there?" Like, it's me, mom.
But I mean, when we first met you at Coppin, it was a thought. But again, in my mind, I was like, well, I guess he okay with being white.
And that's okay. That's the family. You know what I mean? We're multicultural. We can fit in anywhere because you all base it on look.
Yeah.
And we got a look that doesn't really fit in any one category. And it hurts us, it hurts you,
but
it hurts
that's
everybody.
Still a story here.
Yeah,
because we
is.
still have, you know, I have people in my family that still marry light skin. So that part of the family stay light skin.
Yeah.
And that's just what happens. It's what people do. And it was a part of survival.
And that's Cab got him a proctor. You know what I mean? And that was, I don't know if you know the history, but those were very fair-skinned African Americans who were actually Indians who would not marry darker people to keep the skin complexion, and they could enjoy. I still remember my grandmother telling me which theater she could sit in the orchestra section, which one she had to go up in the I remember that conversation.
And people, we still have movies about that, and it's a part of history. My mother is very fair-skinned like you, and she could do things, her brother that's right under her, she's the oldest, he's the second. It was things that they could do that the other 10 siblings couldn't do.
Yeah.
Like my mother was offered to be in a certain.
And here's the way we gotta follow, you know, Cab's lead and Blanche's too. You know, if you can't do it, I'm not doing it either.
But we know we're at a space where that's not.
No, it's not. It's like you can't now. Today, it's like you can't do it. Too bad.
But I can afford to do it, so sorry
about
that.
You know, So and that's where we are. And again, it goes back to that thing about the value. We're putting our lives ahead of the future lives and ahead of.
And as a school teacher, and that's one of the things that since I've been teaching more, I've started to see. And that's something I pray, you know, forgiveness to my parents for not trying harder.
Before this show?
Yeah, I just came from work.
A full-time job, and you doing this?
You have to. Like, somebody got to feed me. I can't keep this thickness, you know, just because. But it's the idea. Well, I love being an artist, but I love giving back because I would not be an artist if we didn't have all those artists come by Furman L. Templeton. That's really where it started. What's her name? Miss Blackwell was our principal. Mr. Jones was the principal before that. And they gave us a lot of black history. I know who Langston Hughes is. I'm the darker brother they sent me to eat. I know those stories, the spook that sit in the corner. I know those stories because those people. It was just that after Furman L. Templeton, it was Catholic white schools.
It's
and
like
it became, and there was no, from middle school to high school, I got one day of black history. And that one day told me that slavery wasn't as tough as we have made it out to be. Why would you beat your slave? That's like beating on your tractor. That's what slavery was compared to. That one day.
And did you get any Native American history?
None. And we had, you know, those schools do lavish. I went to Archbishop Curley and St. Ignatius Loyola Academy. Lavish, you know, weeks where we spend each day learning about a different culture. In the cafeteria, we're eating certain things. We never had no fufu or no jalavice or, you know, African or American history in terms of black people. One day in one class by a U.S. history teacher that looked like a good old boy. It was me and a gentleman named Kojo. He said, the two of you go stand outside. And that was his lesson on segregation. And then the second part was slavery in America, which he was going backwards, and slavery wasn't as bad as we made it out to be. Wow. Why would we beat our slaves? That's like beating your tractor. And I was like, this seems weird to me. And I got up and walked out, got my coat, and I almost got suspended that day because I was like, and it was a bunch of white guys, and they were just looking at us, and they were laughing, and I was like, this not coming from Fermanagh Templeton. I know this is a lie. You hear stories where people go through that, but I was like, that's never going to happen to me.
And how do you deconstruct that? And I think Bell Hooks said it best. You just have to make a deliberate effort to love blackness. You have to say, I am going to personally make up for all of this.
But some of us believed it. I've met Kojo years later, and he said to me, and I asked him, did he remember? And he was like, well, nobody ever told me anything different. I thought what he was saying was the truth. He didn't understand why I was mad. He thought I was just being like angry at this white man. I was like, because he was lying to us.
Yes, he was. He was diminishing your existence.
But he never took the time since then to learn it. So we the same age, 36. Mm-hmm. So he's gone through his life believing that white man who gave him history was telling the truth.
Yeah, and I think one of the most powerful things is just to apologize. It's just to say to people, I'm really sorry that all this has come about this way,
but I know we can do better. Look at the fight over reparations. What that would look like. We can imagine, like, I would love for my Sallie Mae to just be wiped clean and debt free, or give us all debt relief. Mm-hmm. Something. But even fighting for that when other cultures, where they were just given a check, and it was just that simple. But it's so many of us that it would be asked. This country would bankrupt in a day.
Not really. They just have to cut from someplace else. They'll figure it out. And besides, look at the crisis, in 2008. If you can't figure out how much you owe, just print more money. Just keep on going. You know what I mean? Act like it's not there, and we'll move ahead.
And our children pay for it later on.
Yeah, and that's again that same mentality. So I don't know what's going to happen, but I know that as long as if we can begin to value each other, we can change the culture. If we can change the culture, then we have an opportunity to express ourselves more fully. And I think that's what happened. I think that's the story of Cab and them. Andrew Reed really valued black people. He valued his life. He valued his family. He set about a leadership and a tempo and stuff that later generations followed on. He couldn't have imagined that would happen, but as a result, they continued on. And I think, to a certain extent, it was partly Cab's thing. Cab, again, like I was saying about Spike, he probably should have checked in at Coppin. You know what I mean? He should have checked in at Morgan and stuff. And we just have to make a deliberate, conscious effort to love our blackness as the unique thing that makes us special, rather than what we're doing now, which is
beyond just loving who we are, thinking about the next generation and what we're taking from them. We're taking all of these crops and not replanting any seeds. We're going to take our final break. We'll be right back here with Peter Brooks with the Cab Calloway story. When we return, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. I think
If I sit around, hold up, look. If I sit around, hold up. Yeah, rebel rough. If I sit around, I'ma smoke some more. Wasn't even thinking about smoke before, but I'm in my head, I'm in the bed. Don't know who I am, like I'm wearing a mask. Work them old, tell them where the cash. If you wear the cash, tell them where the cash. If you playing for you, gon' run it back. Don't make promises, but I promise that. Don't promise me, cause I ain't into that. Fell in love with that and got hurt from that. Now it's all over and the curtains back. can't see, you not noticing that. I'm letting it go, it ain't holding me back. Yeah, I'm on dice, but ain't come for the crack. Drinking with uncle, we only do jack. How I'm alive, I thank God for that. Praying about it, things getting better. Open it up with my name on the letter, what you crazy about it?
Now listen to BeExposedRadio.com. Check out this fire flashback.
We need to relearn what it is to be these bosses and how we conduct ourselves as business-minded individuals and just people in general. I let my gut, and if I call it gut or God or whatever, I'm led by that energy. I know where it comes from. I know where it's, taking me, and you have to figure out what is important to you, and don't play this game. It's a game that we've learned to play, this chess game, and life is not a chess game. Life is real, bones, flesh, blood, decisions.
Make sure you check out the Artist Exchange Show every Monday and Friday at 2 p.m. only on BeExposedRadio.com.
Same respect, what is happening? We're trading what's important for shiny things. I can't allow this blasphemy. It's blasphemy. Why would you treat yourself like that? We didn't come this far just to fall right back. Don't lose yourself, stay on track. Baby, you're a god. Baby, you're a god. Believe that. Full of the things that we've overcome. Full of unspoken battles we've won. You're so much better than that. Sometimes the truth ain't always catchy as rap. Stop chasing cheese or you get stuck in a trap. Go get your crown and never render it back. No, it's blasphemy. Why would you treat yourself like that? Stop all that blasphemy. We didn't come this far just to fall right back. Baby, you're a god. You're a god. You're a god.
You are listening to BeExposedRadio.com.
Rufus Roundtree, or I don't know. But I'll connect you to it. Welcome back to the Artist Exchange Radio Show. This is the last segment of the show, and in this segment, I like to wrap up the conversation. So, one, give us information on what people can do in this moment to help out the cause, or
I think the best thing is to call the mayor. I mean, the housing commissioner does work for the mayor. The CHAP is part of the Department of Planning. They're the ones who submitted the letter to the housing commissioner asking for 90 days. But if the mayor of the city of Baltimore says, do not tear down that house, the housing commissioner is obliged not to tear it down. I mean, I guess at risk of his job. I think the governor has tremendous power too. People say he has no jurisdiction in the city, but it's his state. And if he can save a person's life from execution anywhere in the state,
but they have declared it a historical mark in terms of the civil rights movement, so he would have jurisdiction in that.
Well, we'll see. And then I think, change.org is where the petition is. You can just look up Cab Calloway.
Okay.
I did a blog, a website thing called thecallowayhome.org is something else. But, I mean, the main thing is contacting your city officials, because it can't get historical designation without legislation. So the city council has got to say, and they have to have a bill introduced, and no one will do that outside of their district, and because of the politics, even though this is a thing of world heritage, it comes down to just these few people who have to take action but won't.
So my last question to you would be, what advice would you give to your 17-year-old self, and what question would you ask to your 100-year-old self?
Oh my gosh, what advice would I give to my 17-year-old self? I would try to convince myself that loneliness is not that bad. You don't have to make bad choices and risk your health and stuff like that because you feel lonely. You know what I mean? I would say that, there are resources out there to help you overcome that. Man, I found something on YouTube, a thing about brain waves and overcoming, and it's really powerful.
Meditation can save a life.
Yeah, look to yourself, you know what I mean, and that kind of thing. And I think the question I would ask my 100-year self, obviously, is what happened?
What happened?
What happened, man?
Tell me what
you
happened.
had all this, and what happened? You know what I mean?
So whatever I can do as the Artist Exchange to help you further push the mission, and I'll post the petition up as well. But creatively, anything that I can do to help you push
I feel the
this
same
mission.
way toward the Artist Exchange. I
Well,
love
we'll
this
talk after
studio,
this.
man, and
We'll
whatever
talk.
I can do to help you as well. But that's what it takes, and that's what y'all need to see, is that,
Start the conversation.
for your giving, I give in return, and that's where it starts.
Just start the conversation. So, without further ado, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate
I know
you,
downtown isn't the best city to maneuver around.
No thing.
But I really thank you all for tuning in. We're going to share this show out as much as I can, and I'll start the conversation after the show saves. Up next is I was about to say the kitty cat, the Cocktail Social radio show, and then after that, It Is What It Is radio show. And shout out to Dope Elevations out of Philly. She came down here a couple weeks ago and gave me this really dope t-shirt. So thank you for the t-shirt. Thank you for the love. And
I got a couple shouts.
Go ahead.
Man, I gotta shout out first of all to Reba Hawkins running for the 7th District. Also got a shout out to Jill Carter, man. Got her support as well. So I'm grateful to both of them. Reba has really put resources into this thing, and having met her, I'm so deeply impressed with her. I think you ought to give her a shot, just look at her and stuff. I'm not going to tell you who to vote for. I don't know really myself, but I do want to say it's
coins in this race.
Really important that you do vote, no matter who it is. You have got to show up, because this is the core of our problem. When we don't show up to vote, they have no value in us at all as a people.
And our individual voice has more power than we will ever know.
Yes,
thank you again, sir.
vote.
We're going to talk definitely. And he's going to be back on sometime soon when he gets time. But again, thank you all. That's been the Artist Exchange Radio Show. Peace out. See you Monday. Brand new show, 5 p.m. every Monday and Friday. Check you out. Peace.
Like, the one thing you always gotta remember is people gonna try to project their insecurities onto you.